What happens when Hollywood's biggest action hero sits down for what should be a friendly chat, only to face a host who seems determined to tear him down on live television? It only took 35 seconds of brutal questioning for Jimmy Kimmel to push Sylvester Stallone past his breaking point, creating one of the most shocking moments in late-night television history. The studio lights were blazing hot that Tuesday evening as Sylvester Stallone walked onto the Jimmy Kimmel live stage. The audience erupted in cheers and applause. Here was Rocky Balboa himself, the man who had inspired millions with his underdog stories and never-give-up attitude. Stallone waved to the crowd, that familiar, crooked smile spreading across his weathered face as he made his way to the guest chair. Jimmy Kimmel stood behind his desk, grinning widely as he gestured for the audience to settle down. But something felt different tonight. There was a strange glint in Kimmel's eyes, a tension that hung in the air like smoke before a fire. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Sylvester Stallone," Kimmel announced, his voice carrying that usual late-night host charm. Stallone settled into the guest chair, adjusting his jacket and nodding to the crowd one more time. "Great to be here, Jimmy," Stallone said in that distinctive gravelly voice that had become iconic over decades of filmmaking. "Thanks for having me on." Kimmel sat down behind his desk, shuffling through his note cards with an odd smirk. "Oh, the pleasure is all mine, Sly. Really, It Island." There was something in his tone, a sharpness that cut through the usual pleasantries. The audience was still buzzing with excitement, unaware of what was about to unfold. Stallone crossed one leg over the other, looking relaxed and ready for what he assumed would be a typical promotional interview. After all, he had done hundreds of these over the years. "So Stallone," Kimmel began, deliberately dropping the respectful nickname, "let's talk about your new movie. But first, I have to ask about something that's been bothering me for years." Stallone's eyebrows raised slightly. This wasn't the usual opening he was used to. "Sure, Jimmy, what's on your mind?" Kimmel leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, staring directly at his guest. "I've been wondering, do you ever get tired of playing the same character over and over again? I mean, isn't Rocky just Apollo Creed's punching bag who got lucky?" The studio fell silent. You could hear a pin drop. Stallone's expression shifted, the easy smile fading as he processed what had just been said. The audience wasn't sure if this was part of some elaborate joke setup or if things had just taken a serious turn. "Excuse me?" Stallone asked, his voice steady but with an edge creeping in. "I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at." Kimmel chuckled, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. It was cold, calculating. "Come on, Sly, we're all friends here. I'm just saying, Rocky loses most of his fights, right? He gets beaten up for 2 hours, mumbles a few inspirational lines, and somehow that makes him a hero? Seems like you built a career on playing a loser who talks funny." The camera captured every micro-expression on Stallone's face. His jaw tightened, his hands gripped the armrests of the chair. This wasn't playful ribbing between celebrities. This was a deliberate attack, and everyone in the studio could feel it. "Jimmy," Stallone said, his voice lower now, more controlled, "I think you might be misunderstanding what those movies were about. Rocky wasn't about winning or losing. It was about heart, about never giving up, about proving that an ordinary person could do extraordinary things." But Kimmel wasn't backing down. If anything, he was doubling down on his aggressive approach. "Oh, I understand perfectly. You made millions convincing people that getting your face pounded in makes you heroic. Pretty convenient message from someone who never actually stepped into a real ring, wouldn't you say?" The audience was becoming uncomfortable now. Some people shifted in their seats. Others looked around nervously. This wasn't the lighthearted entertainment they had come for. Stallone sat up straighter, his famous composure starting to crack under the relentless verbal assault. "I think you're way out of line here," Stallone replied, his voice rising slightly. "Those movies meant something to people. They gave hope to folks who felt beaten down by life. I'm proud of that work." Kimmel laughed again, that same harsh sound that was becoming more grating by the second. "Beaten down? Huh? Is that what you call it when you can barely string together a coherent sentence without sounding like you just went 12 rounds with Mike Tyson?" Now the gloves were completely off. Kimmel was mocking not just Stallone's characters, but his speech, his intelligence, his very essence as a person. The camera zoomed in on Stallone's face, capturing the moment when years of Hollywood politeness began to crumble away. The studio audience was dead silent now, caught between shock and disbelief. Some people in the front row were visibly cringing, unsure whether they should laugh, boo, or just leave. Stallone's hands were gripping the chair arms so tightly his knuckles had turned white. "You know what, Jimmy?" Stallone said, his voice deadly calm but trembling with barely contained fury. "I came here tonight as a professional, as a guest on your show, expecting to have a respectful conversation. But you seem more interested in taking cheap shots than actually talking. Kimmel shrugged, completely unfazed by the obvious anger building across from him. Hey, I'm just asking the tough questions nobody else will ask. Isn't that what good journalism is about? Getting to the truth? Journalism. Stallone's voice cracked with disbelief. This isn't journalism, Jimmy. This is a hit job. And I don't know why you're doing it, but I'm not going to sit here and take it. But Kimmel was just getting started. He pulled out another note card, looking at it with mock seriousness before glancing back at his increasingly agitated guest. Speaking of truth, let's talk about your writing. Rocky, Rocky 2, Rocky 3. Not exactly Shakespeare, is it? I mean, how many times can you write the same story about a guy getting punched in the head? The audience gasped. Even by late-night television standards, this was brutal. Stallone had written those screenplays himself, pouring his heart and soul into stories that had touched millions of people worldwide. And here was Kimmel, dismissing them like they were garbage. Those movies launched my career, Stallone said through gritted teeth. I wrote Rocky when I was broke, when nobody believed in me. I sold my dog to pay rent while I was trying to get that script sold. When I finally got a deal, the first thing I did was buy him back. Kimmel rolled his eyes dramatically. Oh, here we go with the sob story. The struggling artist who made it big. How original. Did you practice that speech in the mirror? Or does it just come naturally? That did it. Something snapped inside Stallone's chest, like a wire that had been stretched too far, finally breaking. His face flushed red, and when he spoke, his voice was no longer the controlled tone of a seasoned professional. It was raw, angry, human. What the hell is wrong with you? Stallone exploded, half rising from his chair. I don't know what your problem is, but you're being a complete jerk for no reason. I've never done anything to you. The audience let out a collective gasp. This wasn't scripted banter anymore. This was real anger, real hurt, playing out in real time on live television. The camera operators were frantically adjusting their shots, trying to capture every moment of this unexpected drama. Kimmel's eyes lit up with what looked like genuine pleasure. He had gotten the reaction he was fishing for, and he wasn't about to let up now. Oh, now we're seeing the real Stallone, the guy who throws a tantrum when someone doesn't worship at his altar. Very mature, very professional. Professional? Stallone was fully standing now, his voice booming across the studio. You want to talk about professional? A professional host treats his guests with respect. A professional doesn't ambush someone who came here in good faith. Good faith? Kimmel laughed, slapping his desk for emphasis. You came here to sell your movie, just like every other celebrity who sits in that chair. Don't pretend this is about anything noble. The tension in the room was suffocating. Audience members were looking around nervously, some pulling out their phones to record what was happening. The producers in the control room were probably having heart attacks, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this train wreck continue. Stallone took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain some composure. But Kimmel wasn't finished yet. He reached for another note card, his movements deliberate and theatrical. Let's talk about your acting range, Kimmel continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Rocky, Rambo, Cobra, all basically the same guy with different costumes. Do you even know how to play a character who doesn't solve problems by punching things? That was the final straw. Stallone's face contorted with rage and hurt. Here was a man who had dedicated his life to entertaining people, who had created characters that inspired generations, being reduced to a one-dimensional caricature by someone who had never created anything meaningful himself. You know what your problem is, Jimmy? Stallone's voice was shaking now, not with fear, but with pure, unfiltered anger. You sit behind that desk every night making jokes about people who actually go out there and create things, who take risks, who put themselves on the line. What have you ever created? What have you ever risked? For the first time since the interview began, Kimmel's smug expression flickered. Just for a moment, uncertainty crossed his face, but he quickly recovered, leaning back in his chair with forced casualness. I create comedy, Kimmel replied, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. I entertain millions of people every night. Comedy? Stallone's laugh was bitter, filled with contempt. You call this comedy? Tearing down someone who came here as your guest? Making fun of things that mean something to people? That's not comedy, Jimmy. That's just cruelty. The audience was completely silent now, watching this verbal bloodbath unfold. Some people looked genuinely uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and avoiding eye contact with either man on stage. Others were leaning forward, transfixed by the raw emotion playing out before them. Kimmel tried to regain control of the situation. Look, Sly, maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we just talk about your new movie and... No, Stallone cut him off, his voice like steel. "We're not doing that. You don't get to attack me for 10 minutes and then pretend everything's fine. You crossed a line tonight, and you know it." "I was just having some fun," Kimmel protested, but his earlier swagger was completely gone now. "It's late-night television, we joke around." "Fun?" Stallone's voice rose to a roar that echoed through the studio. "You think it's fun to mock someone's life work? You think it's fun to make someone feel like garbage on national television? What kind of person are you?" The camera captured every detail of Kimmel's face as the reality of what he had done began to sink in. The color drained from his cheeks, and for the first time, he looked genuinely rattled. The audience could sense the shift in power dynamics happening right before their eyes. "I didn't mean," Kimmel started to say, but Stallone wasn't having any of it. "You didn't mean what? To be a bully? To humiliate your guest? To show the world what kind of person you really are when the cameras are rolling?" Stallone was pacing now, unable to contain his energy. "You meant every word, Jimmy. Own it." The silence that followed was deafening. Kimmel sat frozen behind his desk, clearly out of his depth now that his victim was fighting back. This wasn't how these things were supposed to go. Guests were supposed to laugh along, play the game, take the hits with good humor. "You want to know something about those movies you were mocking?" Stallone continued, his voice now steady and powerful. "I get letters from people all over the world, kids who are getting bullied at school, workers who lost their jobs, people going through divorces, fighting cancer, dealing with loss. They tell me those characters help them keep going when they wanted to give up." Kimmel opened his mouth to respond, but Stallone held up a hand to stop him. "I'm not finished," Stallone said firmly. "You sit here night after night making jokes about people's dreams, their struggles, their efforts to make something meaningful. But what do you contribute? What do you give back to the world besides cheap laughs at other people's expense?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kimmel looked around desperately, as if hoping someone would rescue him from this situation he had created. But there was no escape, no commercial break, no way to undo what had happened. "That's what I thought," Stallone said when no answer came. "You're just another guy with a microphone who thinks tearing people down makes you clever." And with that, Stallone reached for the small microphone, clipped to his jacket and pulled it off, letting it drop to the floor with a sharp thud that echoed through the silent studio. The sound was like a gunshot in the tension-filled air. "I'm done here," Stallone announced, looking directly into the camera. "I came here to talk about my work, to connect with fans, to be part of something positive. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who seems to think cruelty is entertainment." He turned toward Kimmel one last time, his eyes blazing with righteous anger. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Jimmy. This isn't who you should be." Without another word, Stallone walked off the set, leaving Kimmel sitting alone behind his desk, staring after him in stunned silence. The audience didn't know whether to applaud, boo, or just sit in shocked quiet. Some people were already standing, unsure if the show was over or if something else was about to happen. Kimmel looked directly into the camera, his face pale and drawn. For once in his career, he was completely speechless.